Welcome to Chapter 30, the Reagan Revolution. Ronald Reagan won the presidency in 1980, calling for smaller government, less regulation, and he had a tough stance on the Soviet Union. The Republicans had won control of the Senate, but the House was under nominal control by the Democrats. Reagan began to implement his campaign promises by convincing Congress to pass the Economic Recovery Act of 1981. So this Recovery Act was a massive tax break that favored the wealthiest of the wealthy and large wealthy corporations and industries. So the idea behind this was that decreasing the tax rates would lead to more investment and therefore a stronger economy that would ultimately result in an increase in tax revenue. This was commonly referred to as trickle-down economics, and the idea that giving huge tax breaks to corporations and industries and the wealthiest people who operated those would give them the opportunity to hire more people, pay them better wages, and stimulate the economy through that kind of growth. Honestly, it just didn't happen because the wealthiest and the wealthy corporations took those tax breaks and they held on to that money. They didn't invest it. They didn't invest it in the economy by investing it into more employees. So it didn't work. The nation quickly ran up the largest deficits in its history at that point, caused primarily because of a deficit in tax revenue. It just wasn't coming in. We'd just given too big of a tax break to the wealthy and to the large corporations. So the economy entered a recession during Reagan's first term in office, but it started pulling out of the recession before the beginning of his second term. The nation experienced uneven economic growth during the latter half of the 1980s, with many upper-class people still doing well. The era was marked by economic abuses, especially in the stock market, investment, and the burgeoning savings and loan scandal. Reagan also embraced deregulation. His high-level appointees did what they could to help businesses operate with minimal regulation, often at the expense of the environment or consumer protection. Also on the domestic front, Reagan won some cuts in welfare spending, but he was quickly rebuffed by the nation's senior citizens when he attempted to cut Social Security. Reagan's dramatic increase in military spending rested on his belief that the Soviet Union was way ahead of the United States in terms of nuclear arms and conventional weaponry. And he also believed that Russia was out for world domination. So his decision to allow placement of new NATO medium-range nuclear missiles in Europe, along with the announcement of the Strategic Defense Initiative, sent the US-Soviet relations into a deep freeze. So the Cold War between these nations intensified. The ascension of Mikhail Gorbachev to the leadership of the Soviet Union brought quick and lasting change, both domestically in the Soviet Union and in relations between the two superpowers. The two leaders negotiated the INF agreement, which removed medium and short-range missiles from Europe, and began relatively cooperative relationship. There were other foreign policy matters of importance too. The Reagan administration sought to hinder communism in Central America and the Caribbean. It's that kind of containment mentality that we've talked about already in the last couple of chapters. The military invaded the island of Grenada in 1983, and the administration pumped aid to El Salvador's conservative government and the Contra rebels fighting against the Marxist Sandinista government in Nicaragua. In the mid-1980s, Congress passed the Boland Agreement, which forbid sending aid to the Contras. The administration tried to get around this policy by funneling profits from secret arms sales to Iran to the Contras. This created the Iran Gate scandal. Many were appalled that Reagan would sell arms to Iran, one of America's chief enemies, in exchange for the supposed release of the American hostages in Lebanon, especially after the president had talked and acted so tough on terrorism with the bombing of Libya. Investigations found that the president had an unclear grasp of his own administration's policies and that the laws and the Constitution of the United States had been violated.